Hey everybody, welcome back. And if you're new to the show, welcome to One Step Beyond. Today we are with John LaCroix. This is someone that I've been really excited to talk to because not only have I been a real big fan of what he's done creatively through music and art, I've also been a huge fan of what he's been doing with his career. Really, truly one of those people who's been able to take all of these things that we learn in this like DIY punk rock community and apply it to building a really, really cool career. And there's a lot of surprises in his story that I'm looking forward to sharing. So, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. My first question is, how does a guy who comes from punk and hardcore and plays in what I consider to be like a legendary band, 10 Year Fight, find himself, so going from Boston, playing in this super cool band, out in California, and now in this very senior level position in Walmart? How does that happen?
I'm a person who is never happy with the level I'm at in anything. I like to take on difficult things, and that's where I get my energy and my passion. So I really feel like it's kind of been a problem sometimes because I'm impatient, and I've spent my career like working, I think double or triple time, really. Like that's always been my way of getting to where I'm at. You know, I figured like I would say no to nothing. Any friend calls me, they need a t-shirt design, they need a band logo, they need anything, I'm there. I will say absolute yes. At the same time, I was saying yes to all the corporate stuff. So I was working freelance as a corporate person. I worked at Polaroid in 94. So I'm never happy with where I'm at. Not a negative thing. It's more of a positive thing. It's like, I'm ready for the next challenge. I'm ready to take on more. And part of that is necessity. I grew up like really poor. My mom had me when she was 15 years old. I wanted things. I mean, I remember like watching like a Dawkins video and just, crying deeply, like hurt that I didn't have one of those like majestic things in my hand, guitar.
Yeah.
And I made a decision, and some of it came from a little bit of imposter syndrome, I guess. Like we didn't really get it. We didn't know back then what that meant. Mm-hmm. And of course I was like, I'm talking about when I'm 13 right now, or 12. When I sort of decided like, I'm just going to like put all my time into taking photos of my friends skating and, doing these logos and doing a zine, doing all this stuff and working just double time. And when the opportunity came to do, corporate work, I just put the exact same passion into that as I did, starting a band or any of that stuff.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in the suburbs of Boston. Okay. So northern suburbs of Boston, right on the New Hampshire border, in a place called, I was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and I lived in a place called Methuen, where Cave-In is from. Mm-hmm. A lot of kind of interesting stuff happened in the 90s there. It became sort of a tiny little cultural spot.
Yeah. Lots of cool music and art came and comes out of that area in general. But tell me about growing up, man. So like you mentioned, your mom had you young. You grew up with very little. Yeah. So what was that like for you?
What's weird is I think the weirdest part of my upbringing is our relationship with materialism. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's good or bad for me now, because like I said, it's like I was driven by these things. I wanted these toys. I wanted guitars and skateboards. And I wanted, I always had that dream of, I think everybody had it, right? Someday I'm going to open a warehouse and there's going to be a ramp and we're going to have shows in the back and we'll sell art in the front and we'll make vegan sandwiches and it'll be incredible. I've always wanted something like that. And I've had it to some degree. And when I was growing up, we were so poor, and I was treated like the poor kid, the smelly kid, at a young age. I didn't have a lot of supervision. I didn't have a lot of guidance from people who had succeeded in life. Mm-hmm. Nobody went to college. My mom worked at a sub shop when we were kids. So necessity, right? Like I just said, I want all these things. My family was very funny. Like we had one of the first VCRs. We were poor as dirt, but we had one of the first VCRs. We had Atari when it was like a big deal to have Atari. So when I say like our relationship materialism, we were making up for being poor by acquiring the shiny object of the day.
Yeah. So when you talked about a little bit of imposter syndrome, when do you think that started for you?
Forever. Since the day I was born.
Since
I
the
was
day you were
born. I hate to be like the super negative punk rock dude, but I felt like I was not meant to, be.
Yeah.
Like it was a mistake. I was not born of love by two people. I was not planned out. I was sort of the product of not a very good relationship. And so I felt like an imposter in my own body since the very beginning. I felt, when I was 15, 16, I started going to places like North Andover, which is a richer town. North Andover because of like Exeter or Phillips Academy, where presidents go to high school. And I would go and travel over there, and, the Converge guys lived there in that area, Piebald, again, a very fruitful area. And I always felt like I was still just the poor, dirty kid. And it just always made me feel like, and to be honest, I've always felt like I had like after puberty, I look, I guess, maybe intimidating or something. It's always kind of hurt me. Even like an agency, I worked in an agency many years ago, and somebody said to me, "Oh yeah, like we know just not to mess with you." And I was like, "Why? Like you never even interacted with me." It's like, "Oh, you just look scary. Like you look like this other scary guy we used to have a creative director had a tattoo on his neck." And I was always be like, "Hey man, that's like not cool. Like I'm into like emo music." Well, if they saw 10-Yard Fight Show, they probably realize where I'm like, jumping across people's heads with my guitar and stuff. But I always felt kind of hurt by that. So it's like I had this, upbringing that made me feel out of place. I had this like look and way about my personality, like a little too loud, hyperactive, ADHD from day one. I was, highly tested and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I ended up in the hardcore scene, right? I mean, I was a freak. I went to where the freaks hung out. I felt comfortable around the freaks. And, back to that, like, sort of like, we're afraid of you. Wow, man, like what a way to kill collaboration if you're afraid of me.
Totally.
So I've been working to just change that, for years and years, to change that reputation or that, way that I'm judged.
Yeah. Perception.
Yeah. Perception.
Okay. Let me ask you a question then. For you, was creativity and being involved in creative pursuits, was that even a choice for you?
No choice. No. It chose me.
Yeah. When did you first discover like that power, that release of being involved in the creative process?
I don't know if my ADHD therapy and sort of training, when I was a very young kid, if any of that affected it, because when I was very young, I was, I'd go to school and I got straight A's, right? I knew the material. I got 100% on my science test in like second grade, right? That's a thing I remember. And my conduct grades were F's, like incorrigible, cannot be dealt with. And so about first grade's like age 7, I would go to therapy every day, and they said, "You know what? Let's try this. Maybe John doesn't need to pay attention. Like maybe he can be in class, and maybe we can give him this little," and I had a red box, flip open anytime I feel like I'm going to mess with a kid next to me or talk or be disruptive or like just, or I'm just losing attention, I went into the box. And the box was like crayons and pencils and markers and all that stuff. So it was my solace. It was my moment of zen anytime I wanted to. So I leaned into it. They encouraged me to lean into it. And I was good at drawing. I used to draw these little clowns. They're ugly. I never got any better than I did at that age, which is funny. So I have a real block with like drawing. I can do it when I try really hard, but otherwise it's difficult. So, they encouraged me. And then there came a point where I realized like all the toys and all the playing I wanted to do was role play of me as the boss. or me as the business person, or, so at like say age 7 or 8, 5, 6, 7, even before that, it was like, I'm the band leader and we're starting a band, and a band is a business.
Yeah.
And, I'm also the business person. But then I need to go into my little box of tools and build a stage. I knew it was connected already, and I always wanted to do every bit of it.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know where it was leading.
Yeah. So being a guy who really is just known of you through fanzines and through videos and, through mutual friends, you always struck me as this being this kind of larger than life guy.
Really?
And and also a guy that kind of had a core anxiousness about
Definitely.
Him. So
that's an amazing observation from afar. Anxiousness is, it's like it's everything for me.
Well, so being a guy that I spend all of my time in the psychology of people and working with the psychology of people, especially in the business world. I also know how that can be a huge creative output, that unease that we carry with ourselves, we can channel that in. So if we're thinking about your involvement in punk and hardcore and skateboarding and magazines, where was the moment where you were able to take that and help create a bit of an identity for yourself? Because you talked about being feeling a bit of an imposter syndrome. And we also know that power of suddenly you're not just some random skateboarder, you're the editor of whatever magazine, or you're the bass player of this band or the guitar player of that band. So at what point did something that you created help create an identity for you?
It took a little while. I started a zine very early. I saw a zine, skating. My friend had a friend. He had the Gorilla Biscuits album. Mm-hmm. And we heard, this band Gorilla Biscuits. They're and then somebody said to me, they're like the Descendants, in that song in the Santa Cruz video, mm-hmm. Coolidge.
Yeah.
And they weren't wrong, I guess. So they showed me the zine. I immediately, wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to do that. I didn't feel like anybody was going to welcome me to the party. So I did not ask for permission. I just did it. Yeah. I didn't stop to think if I would be cool. Mm-hmm. I did not know that all things you do in the beginning kind of stink, and they have to, and you really, if you have that attitude, you are clueless for the good first 30% of your project, mm-hmm. or more. And so I did I did photocopied zines. I kept trying to innovate on it. I kept trying to get money to do it. That's when the CD started to come into play. Once I put the CD sampler in there, I realized, oh my God, this zine is actually some kind of a force. People want it.
What was the name of the zine?
Extent. That was Extent. So I did a couple zines early 90s. Extent comes around 93. It starts off, photocopied. It becomes newsprint at some point. Then I found out you could do 2-color. Then I found out I could do 3-color, 4-color, And then I had this idea. Well, all right, people are buying ads. What if I sell space on the CD as an ad? Right? It's worth so much a minute because the CD was, 75 minutes or whatever it was. And at that time, you'd actually had to pay for the time of the CD. So a longer CD would cost you more to press. Mm-hmm. Not anymore. It's very fast now. But so I went and sold all these things, and I put 10 Yard Fight on that sampler as well. And that's when I realized within a few weeks that I could create a movement and people would follow. It was crazy to think that anybody would like 10 Yard Fight at the time, because the scene did not exist. Boston it would ebb and flow as the greatest scene of all time to an absolute shell, nothing. Mm-hmm. And 10 Yard Fight came out around that time. We didn't expect anybody to like it. But when I put it all in the zine and I realized I had an ecosystem, I realized oh wow, I can put it in my zine, and the zine goes out everywhere. And then I have all these people who write me, and I make good relationships with them. And then I book the shows. Mm-hmm. And then I have great bands to come through the shows, and I can play great shows because I'm the one doing it. Like, so Stripe comes through, like, guess who gets to open up?
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I realized when I could move multiple things together and put it all into like one system,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I realized, wow, I guess these people like me. I guess I do have influence.
All right.
But I did not feel like I had influence maybe even 1 second before that.
Okay. So you found that thing that suddenly you're like, oh, like nothing has really mattered up until this point, but now suddenly things matter. Like now I have value. I have something to add.
Yeah. It's like I put out this idea. Everybody thought it was crazy. Like, dude, why are they going to spend money? But I thought, okay, it's, $7,000 to press the CDs. I need to get $7,000. I went out and did that. And when they respond, when it's like sort of when people started to respond quickly to things that I would say. I'd say, hey, I'm going to start a band. And they'd be like, I bet you could make an awesome band. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Or when like when 10 Year Fight broke up and people wanted me to be in their band, it was just crazy. I never noticed I was building like any kind of clout or anything like that.
Yeah, I want to dive into this because it's like really important, but I want to take a step back.
Yeah.
So you get on this creative journey. Up to this point, you'd been this kid that grew up with limited means.
Yep.
You didn't have a lot of role models in your life of people who had gone on to be successful on a larger scale, but it sounds like you were surrounded by like a good family core of people who were actually hardworking.
Yeah, man, this gets complicated. I did not grow up with a family who knew how to be a family.
Okay.
I grew up in a family of generations and generations of physical abuse.
Okay.
Drugs, alcohol. It's funny. I think about, my grandfather's generation and what they grew up with. And man, being alcoholic after all that, it's like, wow. I mean, you kind of have to wonder what they would have done otherwise.
Yeah.
Other than drinking themselves into oblivion. But it created generations and generations of abuse in my family. Mm-hmm. People were very broken. Connections were not made with each other. Like there was no love, I don't believe, between my family. What I did see is like people who were unwilling to ask for help, who are unwilling to admit defeat or, even a problem. Mm-hmm. For a lot of things. And what I saw in my mother was someone who was not going to let this ship go down. She worked. I worked before it was legal to work. I did physical labor at age 12 and 13. And my mother was the same. She worked 2 or 3 jobs. I never saw her until I was in high school. Morning, noon, night, like literally 3 jobs. Like I saw her sleeping on the couch in the middle of the night sometimes. So what I got from them was never give up. Right. It's great. It's a great meme or it's a great trope for hardcore. Never give up, never give in. But it was very real. It was very like, we were a step from homelessness often. Mm-hmm. The washer or dryer would go out and I wouldn't have clothes for months. Mm. So it was that necessity. I'm never, ever going to let my kid live like that again.
Yeah. So that core hustle, like I'm going to do it. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to grind it out.
Life or death hustle.
Okay. So you were brought into the hardcore scene on this wave. Like you were this guy that had that inside.
Yeah.
And you were able to take that and your creative side and your ability to like organize and bring people together to create something. So did anyone in your early experiences ever have a bad reaction to this like business mind, to that kind of like grind it out, I'll never give up? Did you ever have any like negative reactions from people like, were like, why are you such a business person? Or like, who do you think you are? Or like, you're too pushy, you're taking up too much space.
Yeah. Yeah. But never in my encouragement and growth phase. Mm-hmm. Only when I made it. Before that, the feeling I got was sort of like bewilderment from most people. Mm. So if you take like any moment in my crazy life, so say age 17, like I'm about to go to college. I'm freelancing as a photographer around town. I mean, I'm taking pictures of portraits for cops and the baseball, and the Little League. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm doing a zine. I'm in a band. I'm booking shows. I'm working at the ice cream shop. I'm doing all that stuff at once, and I'm still getting decent grades and all that kind of stuff. So I got bewilderment from adults. They were like, "Hey man, whatever." When you're talking about businesses and stuff, like businesses go back for me to like age, like first grade, absolute first grade. I was the candy salesman, but I wasn't just like the candy salesman. Like I was like, I scoured the town for the cheapest candy and deals and whatever I could do. And I made that profit work. And I have the first skateboard on my wall that I ever bought with my own money. That was the original drive. If I don't have a skateboard by the end of the summer, like I'm going to steal one.
Yeah.
It was dire like that. So at the beginning, everyone encouraged me, family, they weren't around. They didn't see what happened. They don't know what was happening when I was taking the train into Boston. They had no idea what I was doing. They had no idea I was like, sitting on a cash box, like $3,000 while there was a riot going on. That's age 17. Later in life, I have had to fight to take up space. And I feel prejudice about my class. I feel classism. Sometimes it's like, well, John, she has an MBA, so you should really just sit down. And I go, well, yeah, I don't have an MBA, but like I have this like life experience, and I know how to do this thing. So I've always had to fight to prove it, show it, and I just developed a style that works with that. I become a pitch person.
Yeah. All right, so because I want to kind of move from one chapter into another chapter.
Yeah, it's crazy.
we got this like incredible coming up. You're a young person dealing with like poverty, challenging family situation, living with ADHD. You don't feel ease in yourself, but you find the other like outcasts.
Yeah.
You find this community of people.
Yep.
And there you get to like, kind of hone your craft. You get to make zines, you get to start bands. And for the audience who's listening who doesn't know, like 10 Yard Fight arguably were, if not the biggest, one of the biggest punk hardcore bands of the late 90s within like the hardcore scene.
It's crazy.
And I grew up in Calgary. I loved and still love 10 Yard Fight. I consider Wrench a good buddy. I really love and care about that guy. And I got to tell you, I was a little bummed I didn't get to see 10 Yard Fight in the reunion a few years ago, but that's a whole other story. So 10 Yard Fight boils up. You take this space and then boom, suddenly 10 Yard Fight's no more. It was like, we're going on a European tour. Then, we're breaking up.
Yeah. The breakup was weird, and it has a lot of factors I haven't even like really discussed in public before. Yeah. So there was another Equal Vision Records band, and they were on tour in Europe while we were getting ready to leave. And they got into something with the booking company. Something didn't go right. And the booking company said, we will never book another one of your bands ever again to Steve Reddy. And so our tour got canceled because of that. Oof. And what's funny is I worked at Forrester Research at the time. So Forrester Research was a legendary company already, and they were still kind of new. And I also was working on my stuff. And then While You Were Sleeping magazine, which is this guy, Roger Gassman, who's a very famous art movie guy and art gallery guy. So when and it's funny, I had a laptop that I was going to bring to Europe, and I was going to work on the zine, the magazine for Roger while I was in Europe. Like I thought that was like some kind of a good plan. When it got canceled, I felt like I wanted to deal less with drama, and I wanted to get on with my career. I truly wanted to get on with my career. I had opportunities, and I felt like, I was never going to be great at this sort of creative director role that I was working towards if I'm spreading my focus in all these ways. And I just had to cut the passion for the band down and out.
So the band breaks up. The band breaks up, and I felt like you went out on a cool record, sounds cool, looks cool, songs are cool. Like, I mean, you kind of arguably helped launch in a way. You gave Tim Baum kind of
American
bit
Nightmare.
more of a platform for him to launch American Nightmare. Like, inarguably, 10-Yard Fight, I think I feel like 10-Yard Fight has kind of like regained some of its proper legacy, because it seemed for a while there. Well, it seemed for a while there like people forgot about 10-Yard Fight, but it seems like it's the band has come back into the proper space. But I don't want to focus too much on 10-Yard Fight, because from my perspective, all right, so 10-Yard Fight breaks up. I'm bummed. Then I hear you've moved out to the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And I was like, whoa, I can't wait to see what band that dude starts out here. This is going to be so awesome. Yep. And then...
Yeah, so there was a story behind that. So that's funny. It happened. I was in Reach the Sky for a little bit after 10-Yard Fight. They were a crazy band as far as ethic is concerned. They would travel to Tennessee on a Thursday and play for 5 people and drive right back. But playing with Reach the Sky, I became really close friends with Scott Vogel. Mm-hmm. And I just would spend a lot of time on the phone with him. Scott was in a dead-end job at the time. He lived in like Arizona or something. He had moved out there. He was like a telecommunications person or something. He was like, he was a call center person. And I just every day was like, let's start a band. Let's start a band. Let's start a band. Every single day. Finally got him to move out to California. We got Todd Jones and God, what's the drummer of Terror's name? Of course,
Nick
Jett. Todd Jones said, hey. Todd Jones would call me every day. It was crazy. Todd Jones is a funny character. Everybody knows that. He'd call me every day and be like, hey man, you need me in this band. You need me in this band. Super intense. And then every other conversation would be like, well, actually I can't do this band because I'm an IT professional. I'm like going to do my career. So like he was doing the same thing, like balancing his career and trying to figure that out. So we started, we were going to call it something else, like The Curse. We started Terror.
It was the curse of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we started Terror. And I went to like 3 practices. And then just somehow I just lost all passion for it. I just lost all drive to do it. I thought about all kinds of things and I thought, I'm not ready to like go back into that world.
Okay. So I want to put a pause there. And just for the audience who doesn't know about John's story or know about hardcore. So when he says he started Terror is without a doubt one of the, probably not just one of the biggest bands of an era, they're just straight up one of the biggest hardcore bands of all time.
Yeah, Scott's a legend.
I'm like, yeah, I'd say very comfortably saying like a legendary band. So you help launch this thing and then I'm out.
Yep.
So let's now talk about your professional career. You can go backwards if you want to talk about it, but let's separate out the punk hardcore side of it and just talk about your career here. Because for me, that's actually the more interesting story.
Totally. I agree. So, I basically got my skills through working triple time, doing all that kind of freelance work. The corporate stuff was always funny because it seemed at odds with my punk roots. But, now I get to bring my punk roots into the job where it's like diversity and inclusion. I get to radically include all kinds of groups of people and it feels like punk rock to me in that way. Bringing everybody in and like everybody's welcome to represent this customer base or whatever it is. So I think there's some parallels, but when it got corporate, I did have to like learn a new way of being, speaking, organizing. It's funny, like hardcore kids and like skateboarders, like they know the video coming next summer. And it's like 3 summers later. I had to drop all that like, oh no, man, like we just need to get it right, bro. We need to get it right. Mm. I dropped all that and I became very much more pragmatic. Mm. I learned how to deal with the business people and the business goal, because in the past, my goal was based on passion. Yeah. I have a passion for this thing and I think it should look like this or feel like this. And I don't know, but I know my customer, right? And my customer was me at that point. But when I get out into the real big world, my customer is everybody at some point. And so, yeah, I mean, there's some things I took with me and there's things I had to really, truly drop.
Yeah. So what'd you have to drop? Like, tell me specifically what you had to
street
drop.
Talk, aggressive talk, hyperbolic, language was like prevalent in the hardcore scene, like exaggeration and blowing things out of proportion and all that stuff. I had to really drop that. That was a bad habit. I had to learn how to, come to terms with that. My freakness now at a certain point is now celebrated here. So I think about a time where I was, I felt like I had, oh man, now I've made it. I'm a group creative director. I'm going into Apple to pitch group creative directors at Apple. And my ECD, executive creative director, looks at me and says, hey man, like roll up sleeves, roll them up. Nobody wants to see a guy in a white shirt. Come on, man. And that's when I realized I could take it and use it as novelty.
Yeah.
And it's been great, but there's also this thing that there's videos of people jumping on each other's heads all out there,
Yeah. Man,
that's very weird.
I love that duality in your story. And this is basically why I started the podcast. It's like people are all sorts of things, right? Like professionals are all sorts of things, and everyone has a storied past, whether it's just like kind of straight and narrow line or like, playing all over the world and doing zines.
Yep.
I
had no idea. Like I had no idea the job I was preparing for.
Yeah.
I thought I was so that's actually one thing that's an important turning point in my career is when I realized I'm not a good designer. And it hurt. And it was like a period of time where I felt like, crap, well, maybe I'll just be a CEO. I'd started my own company and I was focusing so much on the business that I was losing the creative. And I really felt like, man, maybe I've outgrown it, or maybe I never met the mark to be a creative director because I'm not a good designer. But then I realized like leadership is not the job that you did when you were on the team. It's a very, very different job. It's a very different way of thinking. You're not the best of the room. In fact, the people that work for you should be the best of the room, not you.
Yeah. The way I like to describe it is a leader doesn't necessarily need to be a subject matter expert. They need to be an expert at leading the experts.
Yes, 100%.
Getting those people energized, making them feel like connected, like that they care. All right, but let's hit on something though. So you go from, again, you're in this punk world doing all this stuff. Now you're working in big organizations. The idea of passion, because you're like a super passionate guy, and that's something that shines through in everything you do.
Yeah, I can't stop.
But how do you go from being passionate about your projects where there's a clear outcome to you versus now you're in some big company where it's like, how do you have passion about it? You don't own the company. It's not your company. You can't steer the company. How have you maintained that passion and that focus? Chasing
danger, right? Like chasing risk, putting yourself out there, doing difficult things, skateboarding, hardcore, jiu-jitsu. It's hard. It's about doing hard, dangerous, difficult things. It's my adrenaline rush. My adrenaline rush is getting in front of a room of people who are ready to judge me, and, they want my idea to be bad sometimes, and facing that adversity and like winning them over. I mean, it's sort of like, some kind of like cliche movie where like, I'm the underdog and at the end, everybody's rooting for me. Like that feeling is hard to, it's very addictive. I just need it all the time. Yeah. Okay. Like I almost want to be their adversary to begin with, just so that I can win them completely over at the end.
Yeah. So if you were to say, like, for young people coming up in the punk and hardcore scene, or just young professionals, even, what are some of the things, like, you and I come from a similar space where it's like, we grow up with all of these messages from the punk scene about like how terrible corporate America is and capitalism's bad. But both you and I find ourselves now working deeply in that world, like deeply. So what are some of the things, like what are some of the myths you think you could dispel about like corporate culture to young people coming up professionally?
You can get in there and you can actually make a difference. You can actually change things and you can make a difference. It doesn't happen with one person. It happens with many people. So everybody needs to change their attitudes if they feel like, they can't, if there's a company that they love, but they are conflicted, maybe a Nike or something, very cool, but maybe they're conflicted about, the environment or something. I don't know. You can get in there and you can learn that craft and it takes a long, long time. You have to be completely focused. But when you get there, you can make absolute change. If I can make changes in the number one retail brand, the biggest company in the world, or biggest, retail company in the world, and then anybody can do it. You can start small and you can work your way up and you can make changes.
Yeah, totally, man. I love to hear that. All right. I want to ask you a bit of a personal question. So you've mentioned living with ADHD, and, I've met many, many really successful people who live with ADHD.
Yeah.
What have been the gifts of living with ADHD, and what have been the barriers that you've had to overcome?
Yeah. A lot of when I talked about earlier, like the imposter syndrome or feeling like I'm the, loud, annoying guy comes from the ADHD, whether it's real or not. Like I felt like I'm the freaky kind of like loud and, crazy guy. Mm-hmm. What that has done for me is like any other challenge is your job is to rise above it, right? And to put together systems or whatever processes in place that make that thing that is your problem into your superpower. I don't know if that works for all industries, right? Like, I don't know if an ADHD person could be like a court reporter, right? Like listening to everyone say what they're saying and doing it. Of course, ADHD people can do anything they want, but that's a difficult thing. For me, creativity and the job that I'm in, the ADHD works because I am in a meeting 7-8 hours a day at least. While that meeting is happening, I'm getting text messages, Slacks, emails, all on different subjects. And when I jump to the next meeting, those conversations are ongoing. But I've got to shut down my thought process on meeting number 1 and rev up the thought process on meeting number 2, keep those conversations going. And, one thing that people didn't understand about ADHD in the early days is that with the distraction, there's also another side of it, which is hyper focus. And so I learned to make hyper focus work for me really well. Hyper focus, it's sort of like I physically cannot stand up from this desk until I feel like this is done or I've explored every single situation. And it's difficult. Like writing is difficult, but the result for me has been very good because, I don't know, you might sit down if you don't have ADHD, right? You might sit down and write a paragraph. I don't sit down and write a paragraph. I write notes. I draw a little bit. I have to think about it, visualize it. I walk around, do some pacing. And then I sit down and I write the first sentence. And then I do that same process again sometimes. It's arduous, but I'm doing research on the other subject and I'm adding to it. And I'm laboring over it. And to me, that's where the passion and the drive works together with the ADHD to just to make it get done. So I miss no details, or I try not to. And I uncover every idea and keep, I just beat it to hell to try to get that idea to work. Yeah. And that's sometimes I feel like other people should have this power because it's just so great for me.
Yeah. All right. So tell us about you today professionally. So like we've heard about how you came up, your journey, like these turning points. Who are you today as a professional? Like, give us a sense of like what your day-to-day looks like, what you love about your job, like what kind of reach you have.
Yeah. So I work at Walmart. I'm a creative director. I work from home now. I run a big team. I actually run 3 teams. I work on branding of the company. So, a little more than what the logo looks like in all these places and, the extension of that. Then I work on lots and lots of projects, campaigns, advertising campaigns, partnerships, celebrity partnerships and all this kind of cool stuff. What's crazy is that I can make a change. I'm not talking about these big changes like earlier. I'm like a really small change, like the way the phrase is on the page, on the homepage of the website. And the difference in success and and failure is millions of dollars a minute sometimes. So like for me, like you said, anxiousness, like that's great. I'm playing off of that. It gives me the urgency to get it right and to, to put all that attention on it. My job as a creative director is very different than I think maybe some people think it is. It's not that glamorous, right? Like, I mean, I do photo shoots and video shoots and, I review a ton of work. So, a meeting is basically like, okay, John's here. They put it on screen and we flip through it and I go, yes, no, make it yellow, make it blue, change this, change that. Is this okay? Ask a ton of questions, be super annoying, and then repeat over and over again by just dozens and dozens of projects. There's also like incredible fires to put out, just like incredible chaos. So the job's like a 24-hour job. I never stop thinking about it. And, it's not that creative. Like, I don't know, like, do people think creative directors like sit there and just play with art all day? I think they kind of do. I get that stigma sometimes. Like, oh man, like John, just let it go. Like, stop being such a perfectionist. Stop being such an artist. But what I do changes the trajectory of sales by millions and millions and millions. I've also got to work on some of the sensitive things. Like I'm helping to market COVID vaccines, right? We are giving out COVID vaccines and I'm working on marketing and it feels like life and death to me. It feels extremely important.
So as we're getting towards the end of our conversation here, you have just shared so much incredible thinking about how someone can like take the great stuff they've got going on, but also their deficits and make them work. And one of the things I keep hearing about you is like never giving up, like never. Always figuring it out, like make the challenges into strengths, like all of those things. So for professionals anywhere at any stage of their career, if we're going to talk about like, failure is not an option, never ever give up. What is some advice that you can give to someone who's really on that verge of giving up professionally?
Man, it's like I want to hold their hand and, sit down with them and really like get into it. If you're on the verge of giving up, first of all, there's always a better situation or a different situation. Mm-hmm. I have found that having anxiety about making a move to a different job is so wrong. It's so useless because I've taken a jump up every single time. I've always felt like, I can never leave this place. This is me. And, but I'm not getting the right attention or I'm not getting the resources I need. I'm being set up to fail or something like that. You got to keep moving. You got to get on. You got to be careful with this advice, but don't stay in your lane, right? Like, a lot of people, and I get it with if you're in finance, right? Like, I'm not going to question you about the math, right? But when you're in creative, the accountant will have an opinion on the color or the look and feel. And I think that for a lot of people, that is a super positive thing, right? It makes them feel a part of something else, a part of something different, get their mind off of the math or whatever it is they do. So don't stay in your lane, like broaden your horizons, go out there and look for new things to do. I have found people who are utter failures in the job that they do. Mm-hmm. Right. They're on my team and they're just no good at it. And it's sad. I don't give up on those people. I wonder what it is adjacent to this skill set that they can do. And honestly, I've seen it happen, turn it around completely. A person going from, we call, I don't know if you have this term, but performance improvement plan, mm-hmm. right? Means, hey, like you're not doing so great. You need to figure it out. You got about 2 weeks or 3 weeks to figure this out. So here's a list of your problems. I do not like those things, right? Like I like the sentiment of them, but I don't like how mean-spirited they get. What I like is being like, hey man, have you ever written instead of design? Like, have you ever written? You write anything? And all of a sudden you'll hear, oh, actually, no, I do have a blog and, I have all these things. So it's like, get out of your lane, check out other things, see what you can do. When I realized I was not a great designer, it was, like I said, crushing. I was like, oh my God, where am I going to go from here? How could I be a creative director? And then I realized a creative director was like we said. So that's my advice. Don't feel, discontent, right? It's like use discontent to create a new situation for yourself or a new challenge that you can give it a shot.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
All right. So last question for you before we head off into our last words. So most punk hardcore people have a box of demo tapes that have been following them around ever since they were young. And those demos, nobody knows about them except for them and their friends. What are three?
Oh my God, that's an amazing question.
What are three unknown demos from any period that you feel should get a little love?
Oh my God. All right. So I have the Ashes demo. Ashes demo was groundbreaking. Female fronted hardcore singer singing not like a hardcore vocalist. That demo is incredible. It's never leaving me. My box. I don't have a tape player. I do have the first Converge demo. I'm going to use it as blackmail someday for them. And I don't think you should listen to it. It shouldn't get attention. Because Converge is such a force, and they're such an invention or a birthing of a beast. And that beast was not pretty in the beginning.
All right, so we got Ashes. That's one that's perfect.
You got to listen. That demo's incredible. Okay. I loved I don't know if anybody knows this band, but I think they made a 7-inch later. Encounter was a New Jersey band.
Okay.
And they were like emo core. And I love that early emo core. So that's another demo I'm sure I have. The dude sent it to me, and I really cherished it. So there's three demos. Yeah.
All right, Converge is in there as well. All right, so we got those three
demos. It's kind of funny,
demos.
man. I never, I've always had a strange relationship with those guys, but that was a funny demo.
Well, huge shout out to Kurt. Love you, man. All right, so last question. Man, you've got a huge story, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us. Any last words that you want to share with us as we sign off?
Oh man, I don't know. I really don't feel like I can give advice for everybody. What worked for me is not going to work for you, but it probably won't. I took the hard road to my career, meaning if I knew I was going to be a creative director, I would have just said, okay, I'm on the creative director path, designer, senior designer, art director, senior art director, associate, I was going to just make that move, and work at an agency or work brand side, pick one, go. And you could be rich and you can do really well. I did not take that route. I stopped. I spend time on my hobbies, my life. Took me a while to get, there have been periods where I did not, but living my life and, having the guitar here and I have a gym back there and combining creativity, challenge, and then this life thing where it's the clock is ticking, right? I'm 45, I got 20 more years, right? I better make this mean something. But at the same time, I'm going to, like I said, get out of my lane, try different things. And that's how I ended up where I am. If that works for you, enjoy it and don't let the anxiety get you.
All right, my man. Well, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, I will see you in the outro. And Dave, drop the beat. That was an awesome conversation. Thanks so much, John, for joining us and for sharing your story. That idea of never giving up, it just seems so trite. Oh, never give up. But actually, you gotta not give up. For some of us, that means looking at a situation and getting out of it, doing something else. But that's actually not giving up. That's about refocusing, moving our energy. And John had moments of that in his life. And for other situations, it's about pushing through it. So if you got a wall ahead of you, figuring out how to go around it, go over it, or go through it. That idea, though, of never giving up, if we move past these kind of trite ideas of what that could mean and past the memes that we put on Instagram, and we actually think what that means for us individually, it is about tapping into that deeper part of yourself. that part of yourself that has that endless energy to keep going till you get over the next horizon. So thank you so much, John, for sharing your story, sharing your wisdom. And for anyone out there, if you are feeling like, I don't know if I can make it through this, now is the time to look in the mirror and find that extra push that's going to get you there. So as we're wrapping up, I want to remind everyone that we're produced by Patrick McKechnie, edited by Dave Larson, and our design is done by Tammy Levy. We've got a great group of people behind this podcast, and I am forever appreciative of all their hard work. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and I'll see you all next time on One Step Beyond. One Step